Welcome to the Leadership Passport, the podcast where we dive into the journeys, challenges, and insights of school and education leaders from around the world. I'm delighted today to introduce my guest, Leo Thompson. So Leo is the founder of the Edsplorer organization. He's a school advisor, workshop facilitator, public speaker, writer, and is the former head of educational partnerships for learning to learn specialists iCanStudy. He's also been a consultant, school support and evaluation officer for the Council of International Schools for 5 years. He's a former teacher and school head, popular writer and speaker committed to helping children to become their best selves and to live a happy, successful and fulfilling life. Leo is also known for his infographics he designs to stimulate thinking and development. These include the award-winning iconic Inclusion Umbrella featured in many conferences and workshops. Welcome, Leo.
Hey, thank you so much. I know I gave you some of those notes, but not all of those comments have come from me. So no, I appreciate that. And it's great to be on, Kevin, and thanks for inviting me.
Fantastic. And you sent me, I asked you to send me a couple, a bio from yourself, and you sent me two options. So, and it's fascinating. So I'm going to read that now. So Leo, and it seems a bit weird now that we're talking and now I'm going to talk about you in the third person, but well, let's see how it goes. So you're a 10-pound pom born in Tasmania, Australia, to British parents, raised in England, and then overseas since 2003. So you now live in Vienna as a result of making a bone marrow transplant in 1993, which went to an Austrian patient, a doctor with 5 sons. The patient survived leukemia and later got in touch with you. And you paid a visit, eventually decided to move there, and subsequently married an Austrian, had twins. And he's still alive and well, and the two families are close. What an amazing story.
No, true. Yes, there's Dr. Renata Müller, who's a wonderful pediatrician. Yeah, she was the person who got my bone marrow. It's an amazing story actually, because it was my mother's idea and she suggested it. She saw this like Anthony Nolan Trust in the UK advert. And she said, I'm too old for this, Leo, go and add your name to the register. And I wound up giving my bone marrow, and I didn't know where it was going. And it ended up going all the way over to Austria. And that also changed the course of my life. So it's not a hero story, because actually didn't cost me that much effort. And the doctors and the nurses are the heroes and the scientists. But the amazing result of that is that I now live here, and I call Austria my home. So it was pretty life-changing, I guess, for both of us.
Yeah, amazing. So if your leadership style were a song or a movie, what would it be and why?
I like that question. The irreverent side of my personality would probably say it'd be like Rolling Stones, Paint It Black, Give Me Shelter. But I would hope it would be like Start Me Up or something like that, because I've always tried to be a positive leader. And somebody who's trying to motivate and inspire, and probably times where I didn't do that, but as a person, that's the way I've always tried to lead a group of people.
So if we talk a little bit now about your leadership journey, what inspired you to become an international school and education leader?
Yeah. That is a good question. I thought it could be many things really coming together, but what kind of like immediately crystallized in my mind with that question was somebody called James Waldbrand popped up, and he was a former director in the Vienna International School, yonks ago. And so this probably goes back to around about 2007, 2008. And he tapped me on the shoulder one day. I'd been working there for about a year or so, and I'd been volunteering to run a few projects and things. I didn't hold any sort of managerial responsibility. I was just teaching English. And he just tapped me on the shoulder and he said, Leo, you've got something in you, and I think I can help you grow it. And one day he wrote me a reference when he was leaving, and he said that I could be a school director one day. And that had a profound impact, because somebody I respected and trusted believed in me, and it kind of like sowed this seed. So I thought, well, maybe I can, and maybe I can work towards that and develop myself. And so that was kind of like a chain reaction event, and that gave me the kind of like, I wouldn't say it was the confidence, but it gave me the direction to journey in that direction.
And then once you stepped into leadership roles, is there a defining moment in your leadership journey that stands out to you at all?
I don't know if it was one moment, but it was like an epiphany. That I realized how demanding school leadership is, and certainly in the international school world. And you can have strong principles, lots of ideas, but there's a reality that you face. So I think the epiphany was that it's hard and it's demanding and it's time consuming. It's also extremely valuable work, and it's very important work in the international school arena and any walk of life. But I guess I underestimated how demanding it was. And so I have huge empathy and support for school leaders.
And you do a lot of work with CIS and with your consultancy across different cultures. Has there been any aha moments or realizations across that work in diverse communities?
Yeah. Many actually, and you'll probably be familiar with this yourself, Kevin. The more exposure you get to different cultures, different ways of thinking, different ways of seeing things, the more you realize that you're coming at something from a very distinct direction and set of assumptions. And I think it was the intercultural exposure, and CIS, so grateful for my 5 years there. Gratitude really gave me that exposure and provoked me to see that we're making big assumptions, and often very westernized assumptions, or very often very British assumptions in terms of where I was from. And it kind of widened my scope and my worldview. And I think that is really important in international school leadership, because it shines a light a little bit on our blind spots and things that we might assume are the case, but are not the case. And I know the iceberg model and what's below the surface, but those cultural norms and those assumptions are really important to understand when you're working with people and through people.
I couldn't agree more. And that was a big awakening from me when I first moved and worked internationally, was just a realization of how little I actually knew. I thought I knew a fair bit. It was very much a big awakening. And you talked there about some of the kind of, realities of leadership and the toughness in the business and how difficult it can be at times. Wondering what's the toughest leadership challenge you might have faced and how did you navigate it?
Oh, there were a few, and I'm sure you can identify with this. And I think particularly in the context of a very transient, often depending on where you are, like international school world, of high mobility, that can include staff, students, parents, and this or leaders. This sort of turnover effect. And I remember one particular moment where we had a married couple, both teachers with children in the school, and their marriage fell apart irreparably. And it's a sensitive story. It's a very sad story, and tragic in a way. But it was causing real mental health issues as well between them. And in the end, both decided to go. And we were caught short, and we only had, I think it was like, we had 10 weeks to cover until the end of the school year. And I'd lost two of my teachers, and it wasn't a big school either. So we had to figure out how to absorb that and make it work. And I had to kind of like, roll the sleeves up and get back in the classroom. And I took over a full teacher load whilst running the secondary school, and then managed to find a way to manage another subject, a language subject, with as much ingenuity. So I was very lucky. I mean, I worked with the team, and the team stepped up between us and we shared the load, and they were fantastic and very, very supportive. And I was literally dead on my feet at the end of each day, but, having that team there. So that was a tough, challenge. And it was an unforeseen for me as well. I didn't predict it. And those can be really hard ones when you haven't got a schema or plan or a protocol in place, and you just got to do it. And I think that's the nature of leadership, is you step up in the moment.
Yeah. And I think one of the other key elements of leadership is you're not always going to get it right. So I wonder what's one mistake that might have shaped your leadership approach?
I probably need all my fingers here, Kevin. There are many mistakes. I mean, sometimes I say, in my personal perception, it's not always a mistake. It might be a misjudgment, or that you've underestimated something, or you didn't see that coming. So I think in our phenomenological world of perception, it can be many things. For me, think mistake is, I think nature of my personality is I'm very sort of concept driven, and I'm somebody who kind of like I really believe in the idea of chasing the concept and becoming the standard. And so I'm, kind of nerdy guy, like reading research and what's best practice and seeking out excellence, learning from people, following people on LinkedIn, all that stuff. And I think one of my mistakes is somebody who's quite cerebral in that way, is it's very easy not to be grounded in the day-to-day reality of what is actually happening on the ground. And I think one of my early mistakes was probably trying to run too fast with a vision. And, so Daniel Goleman sort of model, I'd be that kind of like, visionary type leader and strategic, but you absolutely have to have that team around you, and you have to have your finger on the pulse of how the team is feeling. And I think at times I may have come over as on a different wavelength or heading in a different direction to what people were feeling, on the ground. I remember one or two heated conversations that I've had privately with individuals, but that was an important epiphany. And when I did the Clifton Strengths Assessment, if you've ever done that, Gallup's one, it was really, really insightful because it confirmed how I process and how I see things and the risks and my blind spots and the need to build the team around me who can compensate for that. And that was a big epiphany moment for me.
And it's interesting when we make some of those mistakes, or like you said, they don't have to be big things, but missteps or perhaps miscalculations at times. Sometimes they can feed into a kind of imposter syndrome. How do you deal with feelings of that, if you do?
Yeah. Oh no. Every day, fake it until you make it. In many ways, is what they say in the theatrical world, and I think that's largely true with leaders. You have to come over as this really interesting blend of confident and humble, and you've got to have showed it. You got that confidence, but you might have huge, self-doubts and be questioning yourself. And I absolutely had those. And even after like 7 years of school leadership, when I stepped into CIS, which is one of the world's leading accreditation organization with amazing people, I felt really, really intimidated. And I felt like I was this like young rookie who'd been entrusted into the school support and accreditation team. I was like, do I even belong here? And the way I managed that was to work my butt off and, learn from people and observe people, get guidance, get feedback and read, and try and cover all of my sort of weak areas or, areas of opportunity, however you want to frame it. So absolutely, I don't know if I've got the best advice because I think people are very different. But I do think imposter syndrome is quite normal. I do believe in building people's belief like that director did with me, James Warbrand, all those years ago. And I feel everybody needs a good mentor and a good coach. And I think my advice for any young leader is to find those people and have them, on sort of quick dial so you can reach out and bounce ideas, because I think, this leadership can be a lonely gig as well. And getting those settings right, you need good people there to advise you. Have your ears open.
Yeah, and I think anyone who's had a really great mentor or colleague or peer that they can ring up, it really is invaluable. And I can, a couple of people, when you were saying that, immediately came to mind that were just tremendously kind of influential and helpful with their advice and feedback at different times.
Yeah,
So
and they're gold if you can find them. And sometimes they don't even know they're that person. That's the interesting thing.
I heard something interesting one time that you should find a mentor, two mentors, one that's 10 years older and one that's 10 years younger than you. And I thought that's a interesting thing to think about in terms of the pace of technology, thinking about new ideas and approaches to keep things fresh.
That's good. I like it. You can see how you're being perceived at different generations.
Yeah. Is there a leadership practice or a habit that has changed the game for you?
I think I mentioned it, but I think, if we're looking at what excellence is, I think coaching. And I've done quite a lot of research and reading around leadership. I guess I was in the sandpit as well. For those 7 years, I see myself now as trying to lead through influence, not through authority and power in terms of what I do. But if we take that model, the idea of being able to through relationships, support somebody's growth and direction and motivation is very, very powerful. And I think, like you say, a mentor is a slightly different sort of distinction to coaching. I think there's an overlap, but I think having a good, coaching capability as a leader is really vital, and that requires that personalization. We talk about it with students, don't we? So we should personalize education for children, build that one-to-one relationship, get to know them. But I think a great leader is going to try and do that with their team as much as possible. There's a guy called Richard Ryerson, and he runs courses on leadership. He's, a sort of, thinker around leadership. He says leading is kind of like achieving a vision or objective all through people. So that human quality of working with people is just so vital. And if you really want to achieve a goal or mission, it is, the culture of the school and the systems that you've got are important. But I think that coaching relationship is game changing if it's done really, really well.
So I guess as we're talking now about sort of casting our minds to the future, how do you see international educational school leadership evolving over the next decade?
Well, there's how I hope it evolves. And then there's, what might happen. And it's hard to, take a crystal ball with such a question. I mean, what do we know? We know SC research that there's nearly 15,000 international schools operating in English alone. That's excluding all the bilingual schools that, are out there. And it's a huge amount. And so the industry is going to grow. The sector is going to grow. I was at the ECIS Leader Conference last week. It was superb. And ISC Research did a presentation about it. And they were also trying to predict the future. So I think many more international schools coming on. Their profile and their demographic might change a little bit. It'll be more local in some regards. That's going to create lots and lots of opportunity for aspiring leaders. And I think that's a great thing. And hopefully that will invite more diversity as well amongst leaders in all of its forms. And I think that's great. I think technology is going to play out significantly. And so it should. And I think, again, machine learning and AI and things, if they can reduce the load of administration, then leaders can get back to doing those really high value, high impact things, including coaching, relationships, spending time with people, and less time on, say, email, which I was often chained to my laptop trying to deal with email. So I think that, those would be useful transitions. Unfortunately, the uncertainty of this sort of VUCA world, this volatile, ambiguous, uncertain, complex world, means that it's really hard to put the finger on the pulse. But what the accreditation organizations are trying to do is lead into more sustainable accreditation models, ones which allow schools to customize and personalize more in their context, and run things more in a sort of project type direction. And I think that's a great opportunity for leaders to develop more strategic skills as well, and take their schools forward in the right way wherever they are.
Yeah, developing those skills to help navigate that uncertainty. Yeah. Is there one piece of advice you'd give to an aspiring school or education leader?
I once had a superb school leader, secondary school leader. Her name was Nancy Shapelius. So I'm going to give her a shout out, and I'm just going to say what she told me. And she said, Leo, in schools, things can get really, really tough. They can get very toxic at times. And often there will be things outside your control, outside your locus of control or loci. And she said, always have your gas mask. So knowing what your gas mask, and by that it means your oxygen mask. And, what is it that you can do that will preserve you and look after yourself? This can be things like knowing how to turn your notifications off, knowing how to take time, knowing how, what values, what relationships, what friendships will sustain you. Take time out for your hobbies, take time out for your families. And I think that's, really priceless information that she gave me. I didn't always do it. I wish I had, but I think that's a good one, is every school leader needs to know what their gas mask is, and also give themselves the right to do that. And here I also give a nod to Dr. Helen Kelly's work about leadership and mental health and physical health as well, and how leaders need to sustain themselves.
Yeah, that balance is so important, and finding, like you said, those things that can sustain you over the long term, so
Yeah. Can I
important.
ask, Kevin, can I ask you a question? Because you are,
Of course,
uh,
of course.
actual school leader right now. And what do you do to balance yourself?
Yeah, so I really love physical activity. So that's been a big part of my life since growing up, whether that's playing football, running, going to the gym, just getting outdoors, and very like specifically doing something in the morning. And then find if you just get up that little bit earlier, do something in the morning, just sets your day up right.
Brilliant.
And whether that's chemically and physically and your mindset and everything, it's obviously all connected. But, you find when the days you don't do that, you really notice a difference, and then you realize how important that is.
Yeah.
So,
I think it's brilliant, and not just for you, but I think for others to see that, because it shows that you're trying to take care of yourself. And I think that's leading for example as well to your team. You found your oxygen mask, as it were.
if you had a magic wand and there's one thing that you could change about international education or school leadership, what might that be?
Opening up doors, because I think the paradigm, has been very much a sort of westernized view of leadership. And I know I'm not the sort of guy who fires bullets at that. I think there's a lot that's come from that, that background, and a lot of these curriculums have emerged from certain countries. But I think there's huge potential across the world. I don't rank any nation or society as better than anyone else. And I think we've got to create those opportunities for diverse leadership. The demographic of international schools is really diverse amongst the students. And I'd love to see that sort of microcosm of diversity equaled by the diversity of educators and leaders in international education. And I really believe that everybody can. And we can advocate for that and create those opportunities.
Yeah, amazing. It sounds like a wonderful place to me. So, a couple of quick questions to wrap things up. Your favorite book on leadership?
Gosh, that is a good question. I mean, Dr. Helen Kelly's book was really important and is very powerful. Again, that's about your leaders and mental health, and various steps you need to take. I did read one, I forget the name of it now, which was years ago, which had a really profound impact. And it was from the founder, I think it was ICI, it's a big very famous pharmaceutical company. And they had this visionary leader, and it tells a story of how he transformed the company. And the messages there were really, again, how to work with people and work towards a vision through people and around people. Nowadays, I tend to read chapters. I follow Harvard Business Review and Forbes and things like that. And occasionally blogs. I follow a lot of blogs and LinkedIn posts from leaders. So I don't tend to consume entire books, but snippets of wisdom or nuggets of wisdom.
One thing you do daily that helps you lead better?
So I don't know about you. I'm an early bird. So I usually get up and I'm part of a sort of 5 a.m. club, as it were. So I get up in the morning and I try and read something interesting or useful, or I try and create something interesting or useful. And so I have this kind of, like, I call it like my fertile sort of mind time, where I feel I can operate best. And that's the best time of day for me to do that before the kids get up, and then you got turmoil in the house and noise and things. So I try and sort of steal a couple of hours before that every day.
Leader, past or present, that you admire?
Well, I've mentioned a couple, Nancy Shapelius, James Walbrand, both had a huge impact on me. I'm very happy to work with many school leaders, particularly through CIS. And there's just so many of them, Kevin. If I name a couple, then the others will be like, but Leo didn't mention me. There's just so many. I give a shout out to, I think Jane Larson is an incredible leader and visionary, and the work that she does at CIS is amazing, and what she's achieved. Just so many. I mean, I've got some fellow Edsplorer as well, Kai Vacher, and I've got, there's quite a few of them, Francesco Banchini, a few others who just inspire me constantly. But there's just so many great leaders out there, but the ones I really admire are the ones who share their wisdom and put it out there in the universe without cost, and just say to grow the next generation.
And finally, best advice you've ever received?
Yeah, the gas mask one. was probably, I have to say, probably the best advice. But another really great bit of advice was from a head of school called Leo Thompson. And he said, Leo, lead with your ears.
Fantastic.
And I think that was great.
Yeah. Short and simple and impactful. Very good. Well, look, thanks so much for joining me today, Leo. It's been a pleasure chatting with you. Thanks so much.
Pleasure. My pleasure.
Thanks so much for listening to the episode. If you enjoyed this conversation, don't forget to subscribe, like, follow, etc. Drop a comment below to let me know anything you'd like covered in upcoming episodes or suggestions for future guests. You can also connect with me on Instagram and LinkedIn.